that Montgomery really had a difficult time pre-war. In World War I, Montgomery was severely wounded. He was actually thrown into a pile with dead bodies and given up for dead. It was his Batman, his aide, that said, hey, no, he's not really dead. And they pulled him off the pile of dead, okay, and he survived, okay. He also had a difficult family life in that his wife in the 1930s was bitten by an insect and had an allergic reaction and died. Okay, so he's a bachelor in World War II, so he has a pretty tragic background. But he was very, very right all the time. But he was right all the time if I have the right amount of time and if I have all the resources at my command, etc., etc. On the other hand, you have a guy like George S. Patton. Okay, so Eisenhower's got to balance these guys. You know, Patton's, one of these, shoot from the hip type of guys, and he's running around with a pistol. Montgomery never carried a firearm. He thought it was, ungentlemanly to carry a firearm. And of course, Patton did carry a firearm. And one time he told his aide, he says, "Go tell that son of a bitch Montgomery that these are not pearl-handled revolvers. They're ivory, goddammit." Okay? And so that's the kind of guy he was. So Eisenhower's got this type of balancing act to do. And it's a very, very difficult one. Montgomery wants to do things his way, and he thinks he's the only guy that's right. Of course, impetuous Patton wants to do his things, and so they're clashing all the time. And so Eisenhower has a difficult command and control situation because he is an allied supreme allied commander. He's not an American commander, and so he's got to think that way, and he's forcing himself to think that way. And I could talk for probably 3 hours about that relationship, but it was difficult. He made his way through it. Many times he just about relieved Montgomery several different times, and I think more for politics than any other reason did not relieve him. Yes, ma'am?
Would you say something about the communications challenges during the campaign?
The communications? Yeah, communications, number one, the communications for the Germans was very poor. And it was poor because of and it was designed to be poor because of the interdictory bombing. And so their communications was largely knocked out and incomplete. Allied communications was generally much better. Communications were an integral part of every U.S. battalion. When we're talking about battalion, we're talking about 600-man force. And so they have a company of signal people. And sometimes those signal people take the highest amount of casualties also, I might add, because they have to string wire and try to keep people communicating. One thing about the Americans, for example, signal-wise, is that every American tank had communication with other tanks and with other people. Okay? In the Soviet Army during World War II, there was one tank per platoon, meaning one piece of communications per 30 people. Whereas in the American and Allied forces, every tank had communications, and generally every platoon had not only primary communications, but backup communications, so that if your Prig 77 radio was shot, you had another guy that could communicate. They also stressed communications, signal communications with flags and things like that, and so it was very, very much stressed. And so it's a good point that you make, because communications did play a tremendous part, and it's oftentimes overlooked that the Allies had very good communications, and especially if you start taking friendly fire. Okay, meaning that the artillery is hitting you instead of somebody else. So communications on the Allies was a tremendous asset.
One more question.
Okay, one more question. Well, I'm happy. Have any questions from my great crew? Yes.
Do they still tow bodies out of the channel from World War I?
I'm not sure about bodies. They have found bodies in tanks. I guess the best one example of that, in the 1970s, they found a tank in Normandy, and that tank was buried probably during bombing, and a farmer's plow hit the tank. Okay, it had been covered with dirt. Farmer's plow hit the tank. They went into the tank and found the bodies in the dog tags. And I'll tell you the rest of the it does happen that occasionally they will come upon remains and they will rebury them. More so, and Darlene and I know about this, more so in World War I. In World War I, they find quite a few of them because the front was so narrow. They're finding bodies all the time, so there'll be burials going on almost, you know, on a monthly basis. They might find some remains and have to bury them. In World War II, not so much because the front is moving a little faster. But that tank that I'm referring to was none other than the tank of Michael Whitman. And Michael Whitman, I don't know if some of you know, was the greatest tank ace of World War II. German tank ace, I might add. He had over 200, I think, I can't remember the exact count, but over 200 kills to his credit. He was a tank ace, mostly Russian. He had, Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with oak leaves and diamonds and all this other stuff, Iron Cross, and he was paraded around Germany as a hero. And but he wanted to get back into the fight, and for the Germans, and he got back into the fight in July, and was with the 12th SS again in one battle at Villers-Bocage, okay, which is a village in Normandy. Michael Whitman himself knocks out 24 tanks, okay, kills 24 tanks in one day. Okay, so that's pretty good. But it was, I think, 2 days thereafter, or 2 or 3 days afterwards, that Allied bombers hit Michael Whitman's tank and kill him. He basically goes as missing. But what happened was his tank was buried. And they recovered that tank in the 1970s, and he's buried in the German cemetery in Normandy. And there's a large German cemetery there, and it's so different than the one that you see at Colville, if you've been to it. The Colville one is all white. It's, I have to say, you know, it's a cemetery, so it's sad, but it's uplifting. You understand that these soldiers died for freedom. They died for a reason. Go to the German cemetery. It's dark and somber. You just shake your head. It's like in the middle there's a mass grave with 20 or 30,000 soldiers buried in one grave.
Just like we also do commemoration in the German cemetery.
Okay. A while back though, before the rapprochement in the last 10 years between Germany and the French, the German cemetery was mowed only by German volunteer students. And so you would go to the German cemetery in Normandy, and in some sections the grass would be up to your knees, and they'd have to come from Germany literally to mow the grass. Now that's been taken care of. Okay, the Prime Minister of both France and Germany have made this agreement, and so they are tending to the cemetery. But Michael Whitman is buried there with his tank crew. It's probably the most decorated grave in that cemetery. And so there are still bodies being found in Normandy. Not so many in Normandy, though, again, as in the World War I areas where they're being found all the time, remains. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank Tom and his crew once again for their time and expertise, and thank you all for coming and for your continued support of our committee. Please feel free to join us downstairs. I think there may be some beverages and some things to nibble on your way out, and if you'd like to continue the conversation, we would be happy to do that downstairs. Thank you again for coming.